Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome to episode 31 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Catherine Erdley and I'm your host, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club. The Resilient Retail Club is my membership group for creative product businesses, and you can find out more at resilientretailclub.com. Today's episode is all about a piece of analysis that it can be really valuable for you to do in your business. And it's one of those pieces of analysis that you can complete in order to get a couple of very simple numbers that will help you understand an awful lot about your business, where it is right now and where it needs to go. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about a break-even analysis. In other words, working out how many items you have to sell in order to not only cover your business costs, but actually to pay yourself a certain amount. It's something that I do with quite a lot of my one-to-one clients. We work our way through and look at it together in detail. And if you're listening to this episode and you're already a member of the Resilient Retail Club, then definitely go check out a mini course called Set Your Goals, which is in the course portal, and it goes through this process, including some templates in a lot more detail. For this episode, what I'm going to talk about is the overall principle of what a break-even analysis is. Fundamentally, doing a break-even analysis allows you to understand how your business works. It's a way of answering a question that I get asked quite frequently. And that question is, how do I incorporate the overheads in my business into my pricing? Sometimes when I speak to people about their pricing, they tell me that there's a formula that they use to break down the overheads in their business and assign a certain amount of those overheads to each product that they sell so that they can work out what their profit is after their overheads. Personally, I find this approach a little bit tricky. I find it tricky because I find it hard to get my head around exactly how it works, breaking down your overheads according to your sales, because of course, the more you sell, then the less amount of money you have to assign per overhead. And for me personally, I find that a difficult concept to wrap my head around. My preferred method of looking at the underlying profitability of your business is to do it into two different steps. The first one is to really get a good understanding of your profit margins. I've touched on this in several podcast episodes, but in particular, take a listen to episode number 3, where I talk about healthy profit margins, if you want more detail about how you go about doing that. And if you're a member of the club, then definitely check out Grow Your Profits, which is the course where I really go into a lot of detail about profitability. Starting with your profitability every time you make a sale by looking at purely your product costs is a good place to start. So getting an understanding of how much money you're making once you take out anything that is related solely to selling that product. So the difference between a product cost and an overhead is a product cost is something that if you sold twice as many products, then your costs would increase. So for example, your packaging is a product cost because if you sell twice as many products, you have to pay more packaging. Whereas something like your rent or your broadband bill or your web hosting, those things may fluctuate slightly as you grow and you sell more, and therefore maybe you need to get a bigger place and then your rent changes. But actually, if you go from selling one product to 2 products, then your rent doesn't increase. So your overheads are the numbers that don't change depending on how many products you sell, and then your product costs are everything that do change. So in my head, it's an easier way to do it. Step number 1 is run the profitability by product. Look at every time you make a sale, how much money you're making once you take off the product costs. Then step 2 is do a break-even analysis, where you then understand that based on the overheads that you've currently got, how many items do you have to sell in order to cover those overheads? And that's my preferred way of doing it. For me, it's easier than trying to break down your overheads into a certain number that you apply to every product, because I think that just gets very tricky. So how do you go about even working this out? It all sounds well and good, but what is the actual process? How would you start? If you're listening to this now and you think, okay, that sounds great. How do I do a break-even analysis? Where would your starting point be? Okay, so the first thing is to write down every fixed cost that you have in your business. From marketing, so for example, if you're paying somebody on a monthly basis to run Facebook ads for you, to your rent, if you're renting business premises, put in the cost of your social media scheduling tool if you use one, any equipment that you're maybe leasing, for example, put in any salaries that you're paying. We'll exclude your own salary for now, but let's say you pay somebody on a monthly basis to come in and help. Then you add all of those costs up. And again, in the Set Your Goals course within the Resilient Retail Club, there's a very long list. It's probably got about 25 or 30 different prompts for you to think about, from your insurance to your accountant's bill to everything that you can possibly think of, any plugins that you might have for your website. What is it that you're paying on a monthly basis, and write it all down. If you're paying some of these on an annual basis, then break it down into a monthly figure by dividing it by 12. So at the end, you have one figure for an average monthly cost. So for example, if you're paying once a year, you pay £1,200 to go to a trade show, for example, then you would write down that is another £100 as a monthly expense. It's a really interesting exercise, to be honest, just to do it, just to really understand, do you know all of the costs that are coming out of your business? When was the last time you did a bit of spring cleaning, if you like? Did you write down every single direct debit or every single scheduled payment that comes out of your business, every membership, every cost that you're paying, and have a look at it so that you know how much it costs to run your business on a monthly basis. And as I said, breaking then down the yearly costs as well. So you can say on a monthly basis, on an average month, of course, this is all based on averages, how much does it cost to run your business? If that's as far as you get, that's actually a really useful exercise, because it gives you a really good idea of what the overheads are in your business. The second step, once you've done that, is to work out on average, again, we're talking about averages, what is your profit that you are making on average every time you sell an item? Now, there's lots of different ways of doing this, again, in Grow Your Profits as a whole exercise and Set Your Goals as a whole exercise on how you work out your average profitability. But basically, it's a question of, number one, understanding what your costs are per product. So if you haven't done that exercise, that's a good exercise to do first. So work out how much profit you're actually making per item every time you make a sale. And then maybe look at the last 12 weeks, have a look at what your sales have been, and think about how you can then calculate off that what the average profit per item is. If you only sell a couple of kinds of items and it's pretty standard profit, then this is not going to take you that long. If you are a business that sells multiple items, different price points, different profitability, it will take you a little bit longer, because you're going to have to download some sales information from your website or from whatever you're using to record your sales. You're going to have to pull in what the profit is for each of those items, and then you're going to have to work out what the average is. Work out the total profit that you've made, and then divide it by the number of units that you've sold. And then from that, work out what the average profit per item was. But what you want to end up with is one number. Again, this is also a really, really useful exercise all by itself. If you take the time to go through and look at your profits per item and understand on average what your profit is based on your actual sales, the actual sales that you've been having for, say, maybe it's the last 6 weeks, because if you say the last 12 weeks, it will include Christmas as well, which sometimes skews things. But let's say the last 6 weeks, and you take a look and you calculate your average profit, then that is going to tell you something really, really valuable about your business. Because what is that number? Is it that you make £5 every time you make a sale? Do you make £2? If you make £2, here's a hint, there's probably not enough profit in your business because that's not a huge amount of money, and it would mean that you'd have to sell hundreds and hundreds of items to hit your goals. Are you making £50, £75? Are you pleasantly surprised when you look at this number and realise, actually, do you know what? Every time I make a sale, I make £25 of profit. What is that number for you and for your business? It will have a really profound impact on the number of units that you have to sell. So it's a really useful exercise to do. And to be honest, it would be a really, really useful exercise to do maybe once a quarter, so that you are able to not only see how it's doing now, but if you make any changes to your product assortment, if you make any changes to your pricing to maybe try and improve your profitability, or you renegotiate some of your prices to bring the costs down, then it would be so helpful to review this again in 3 months and see, am I increasing the average profitability per sale in my business? Is this something that is moving in the right direction? So yes, these exercises take a bit of time, but again, there's so much power in knowing this information about your business, and there's so much power in you being in control of your numbers and being able to say, again, every time I make a sale, this is how much I'm making. So the first step is to getting the break-even analysis, as I said, is to write down all of your fixed costs. The second step is to work out the average profit. And then the third step is you divide your total costs by your average profit, and that is the number of products that you need to sell per month to break even. So for example, your average profit per item is £10. You've done your calculations, you've had a look, you've run your sales analysis for the last 6 weeks, so you've been able to download your sales, you've been able to work out what your cost is per item, work out what your profit is per item, and then based on how you've been selling in the last few weeks, you've worked out that on average, your profit per item is £10. You've also written down your list of all of your fixed costs. You've broken your annual costs down into a monthly cost, and you have determined that your fixed costs are £1,000 a month. So how many items do you have to sell a month to actually cover your costs? Well, if you think about £1,000 worth of costs, you're making £10 of profit. Remember, we're not talking about the selling price here, we're talking about the profit. £10 worth of profit means that you'd have to sell 100 units to cover your costs. So you take 1,000, you divide it by 10. And what can you do with that information? Well, now you've got an idea of how much you need to sell to cover your costs. So if you're in a situation where you're not currently covering your costs, you also have an idea of how far off you are. Some people will do this exercise and work out that they're selling 90 units a month and they actually need to sell 100, and that feels really comfortable. Some people will do this exercise and will realize that actually I need to sell 100 and I'm currently selling 10. Okay, so it's not such a great situation to be in. But now you have got a target. And I do believe that as human beings, we work so much better when we know what we're aiming for. It's one thing to have a vague feeling that, okay, well, I want to break even. I want to have a profitable business. Or most people don't just want to break even. Most people want to become profitable. It's one thing to say I want to have a profitable business. And it's another thing entirely to say, if I sell 100 units a month, based on this average profitability, then I will hit my goal. So it's very, very powerful for you to know that. And you can just write it on a Post-it note and stick it on your monitor. It's much better to do this exercise and come up with one number that's on a Post-it note on your monitor than to create oodles of really complicated spreadsheets that you're never going to look at. So again, doing this exercise will tell you so many really useful things about your business. It will get you really focused on what your costs are, and it will get you really focused on what your profitability is. The other thing that I would just like to point out with this exercise as well is think about this idea of your average profitability and think about the impact that actually has on the work that you have to do in your business to hit break even. So for example, when we were talking about the previous example about £1,000 a month of fixed costs and your average profit per item is £10. Now let's say that you were able to do some work, you maybe did some repricing or renegotiated your costs, you brought down the cost of your packaging, you worked out some other things that were helped bring up your profitability. Maybe you really were able to shift your average selling price up because you had more bundles on offer, for example, on your website, And all of the things that you did meant that your average profit per item was now £20 instead of £10. Now, if your fixed costs don't change in a month, you've got that £1,000 a month, but now your average profit per item is £20, then instead of selling 100 items a month to cover your costs, you've only got to sell 50. And just think about what that means on a practical level for your business. One of the things that I work with very frequently with business owners is this feeling of complete overwhelm, because they're both either dispatching products themselves, orders themselves, or overseeing people who are doing that. They're dealing with customer service queries, they're dealing with trips to the post office, or having their products picked up. They're dealing with packaging. They're dealing with all of the work that is associated with making a sale. So this exercise is also a really great reminder that when we think about growing our sales, it doesn't always have to mean more orders. It doesn't always have to mean more products going out of the door. In fact, there's a very strong argument for you to be growing your average profitability as your goal, because let's face it, if you had to do 50 orders instead of 100 to make the same amount of money in your business, who wouldn't choose that? It would free up your capacity. You'll have lower costs because you don't have to pay people to dispatch. You wouldn't have to make as many trips, all of those things. So often when we talk about growth, we keep thinking about growing and snowballing and more and more orders. And of course, yes, more orders ultimately is the path to growth. But there are other things that you can do on the way, such as really focusing in on your average profitability that can help you grow in a way that feels a lot more steady and a lot more considered. And there's nothing wrong, in fact, there's a lot right with having fewer orders with higher profitability than lots and lots of orders with low profitability. So again, I would just like to urge you, if you do this exercise and you find out that your average profit per order is really low, that's probably why. I'd be willing to bet that you've been feeling pretty overwhelmed, pretty much like your wheels are spinning, like you're doing all of this work and your sales may be coming in, but not necessarily the money in the bank. And I would be willing to bet good money that this is why, because of this idea of your average profitability per order or per item. Okay, so we've gone through the process for having a break-even analysis in your business. Hopefully I've convinced you of the importance, and I'd love to hear from you if you do go through this exercise, what you found, what it meant to you, and what you're going to do about it. So if you're in the group, then let me know. And as I said, in the group, you can use the Set Your Goals course to do this, where you've got the template. Or if you're not in the group and you want to shoot me a message on Instagram, I'm always very happy to chat in DMs and find out how it was for you. But it doesn't necessarily stop there. What you can also do with this break-even analysis, once you've gone to the trouble of calculating all of these numbers, you can then start asking yourself the next question, which is, okay, if I want to bring home a certain amount of money each month, now this will be pre-tax. You have to assume that you'll be paying your tax, your personal tax, your corporation tax, however it works, depending on your business setup. You'll have to pay tax on this amount. But if you think about a certain amount of money that you want to bring home, you can then use the same analysis to then calculate how many units you have to sell to hit that. Once you've got that first number, the second number is much easier. And this number that is going to reflect your ideal number of sales per month. So you can think about how much money you'd like to be taking home in your business. In other words, if you pay yourself a salary, how much would you like it to be each month? So once you've done that, divide that number by your average profit that you worked out in your last step, or the break-even step, and then figure out how many more units you would need to sell on top of your break-even number to achieve that desired salary. For example, each month you would like to take home £2,000 and your average profit is £10 per item, and your monthly costs are £1,000. So in order to make that additional money, you'll need to sell £2,000 divided by £10. So that's your average profit. So you would need to sell another 200 units per month on top of your break-even units to achieve that salary. So in the previous example, the break-even amount was 100 units, and then you've got your ideal sales, your additional sales rather, of 200 units in order to bring that money home for you. And so therefore, your ideal sales units per month is 300. So you'd have 100 break-even units and then another 200 units to bring home your ideal salary. And so you can see it's quite a powerful exercise. You can then play around. It's the same thing, right? If I want to bring home £2,000 a month, but I'm having to sell 300 units, well, what if I was able to increase my average profit? How many units would I have to sell then? What about if you were to add in some additional expenses into your business? How many more units would you have to sell to cover those? Having this kind of information in a spreadsheet and it allows you not just to understand some of the key fundamentals of how your business works, but it also really allows you to model and to play around with various different scenarios. And that's what's just very, very hard to do if you haven't taken the time to kind of drill in and look at these numbers. So for example, you could say, all right, I'd like to take home £2,000. My average profit is £10 per item and my costs are £1,000. Okay, so I know I've got to sell 300 units. Right, if I needed to add in some extra salary, maybe for somebody else to come in and help me, what would that be? How much would I need to cover it? You can also do the same if you want to, for example, have a workshop. For some reason at the moment, quite a few of my clients all at the same time are actually taking on the leases for units. So I've done this exercise with quite a few of them, having a look at how much extra are they going to have to sell from this unit? What does that mean for their business? And it's about trying to just model things out in a way that it's very hard to do if you don't have these numbers mapped out. So taking the time to do this profitability will tell you a lot about the underlying profitability in your business anyway, but it will also just tell you a lot about practically how it's going to work and how it will need to work. So for example, if you do this piece of analysis and it's telling you that you've got to sell 300 units a month, you just simply don't have the capacity to get 300 units through your business each month, then that just answers a lot of questions about, well, if you're wondering, am I going to be able to hit this £2,000 salary? Then this exercise will help you understand that. It will help you understand, yeah, that looks achievable, or maybe no, that doesn't look achievable. And as I said, it could be that you do this analysis and it says that you need to sell 1,000 units a month and you currently sell 150. Well, it's still better to know what it's going to take in order for you to hit your goals than it is to be stuck and lost and not knowing where you want to go and how you're going to get there. So give it a go. Start by writing down all of your costs. Start by making a note of every expense that you've got in your business. Start by working out the monthly and the annual costs, and then look at your average profitability per item over the last 6 weeks. And then take a look at what that means in terms of your break even and what that would mean in terms of wanting to bring home a certain amount of money as a salary. And I'd love to know what you find. And as I said, again, this just means that you can write it on a Post-it note, stick it on your computer, and it will just allow you to have a really strong connection and a sense of what you need to break even and what you need to hit your goals. And it gives you something to aim towards, and it can just make you feel really focused. So that's it from this episode. As I said, do drop me a note. Let me know how you got along. If you enjoyed this, then follow me on Instagram at Resilient Retail Club and tag me when you're listening. I absolutely love seeing all of the tags and the shares of when you're listening into the podcast. If you have a minute and you can rate and review the podcast, especially in iTunes, that helps me enormously. And do subscribe to hear about the new episodes as soon as they are released. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.